Welcome to the Fabric of Our Community. We have an exciting episode today. We are honored to sit down and have a conversation with Dr. Jonathan Reiner, a celebrated cardiologist, author, and media contributor whose groundbreaking work in cardiac care and public health has touched countless lives. His journey is one of compassion, expertise, and unwavering dedication. I'm Traci Mitchell.
Hi, I'm Joel Greenzaid, President and CEO of G Street Fabrics, and welcome to the Fabric of Our Community, where we honor members of our community that have made a big impact. And I have to reintroduce my humble co-host. Our humble co-host is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and author, Traci Mitchell.
Thank you, John.
Now, Jonathan, I've known Dr. John Reiner for many years, over 30 years, and
since we were 5.
Yeah. The thing about John is, first, I know him as a friend. So if you want to look up a definition of a friend, as far as I'm concerned, is somebody that would do anything for you, which he would. But number 2, he will find joy in my successes. And to me, that's a true friend. And I really sort of looked up to John because he's very brilliant. And I've oftentimes sort of felt proud that I'm friends with Dr. Jonathan Reiner. So we're going to hear the story, and we'll start from the beginning. And yes.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I like to think that the story is, still continuing, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I met you when our oldest kids, who are almost 30 now, right, were old enough to sit to line 6 of them up on a small couch with their feet sticking out like this. The wonderful thing about being friends for a long time is that, you go through the triumphs and the celebrations and the tragedies and the tough times together, right? And we've experienced these together.
Yes.
All the way through.
Okay, but you skipped over an important part. How did you meet?
So our wives met in a play group for our 6-month-olds or 1-year-olds.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, we have, our family's pictures are interspersed with Joel's family's pictures. Nice. So, we have friends in common, and friends become family. And so it's been, a highlight of my life to get to know the Greenzaids, all the Greenzaids.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I will say that Joel is a sweet man, and there's a sweetness to your soul. So when you said, "Hey, I've got this podcast, you want to talk?" It's like, tell me when.
Thank you.
And that's amazing coming from you, because obviously this is important, and your friendship, I'm sure, is very important. But you are also saving lives. Like, people say I save lives, but you actually save lives. No?
Well, sometimes.
Sometimes. I hope more times than not.
Yeah, let's hear about that. Let's hear about that, because we want to hear, and I appreciate everything you said about me. It's so meaningful, but we want to hear about you and where it started and how you got to where you are today.
Well, guide me along the way, but I started in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn.
Right.
My dad had a series of businesses. He was mostly in the furniture business, so an allied business to yours.
Right.
So, I remember learning about fabrics and design when I was a little kid. My mother was a New York City school teacher, taught in the public schools for her entire career, and then when she retired, she became a mentor to New York City school teachers. I went to public schools in New York, very proud of that. Went to PS 152. Across the street was Midwood High School. I went to college in Philadelphia. But what I'm proud of, I grew up very much in New York City. Went to a diverse school, public school in a diverse neighborhood. We were just middle class. I mean, the testament to my folks is that I grew up thinking I was rich. But we grew up in this small apartment in Brooklyn, but I thought I was rich. And then I went to college, and I met rich people. And oh yeah, I'm not. We're not rich, but we're rich in all the important ways. My parents instilled in me and my two sisters the desire to do things and to work, to achieve them. My parents had their series of struggles, financially, et cetera, during their lives. But the greatest gift that my folks gave me was, the old saying that if you give someone a fish, you teach them, you feed them for a night. And if you teach them how to fish, you feed them for their life. Right. My folks taught me how to fish. Wow. And their greatest gift to me, their enduring gift to me, was their love, but their really their instruction on just doing good. Mm-hmm. And that's what we teach our kids. That's what you teach your kids. I know. The concept that the goal in this life is to try and leave the place better than you found it. Absolutely. So no matter what you do in life, try and leave the place better than you found it. So I've tried to do that. So I went to college in Philly. I went to Penn. And then I didn't get into med school the first year I applied. Really? No, I didn't get. And I'm actually proud of that too, because I was an average student, and you needed to be better than an average student. 100%. So I spent a year in grad school at Georgetown, which was basically a way for me to prove that I wasn't just an average student. Mm-hmm. And then I did, and then I got into Georgetown. And the year that I got into medical school, and I'm not sure I've told anyone this, and I don't think you know this, the year I got into medical school, I got one interview. Wow. And I got into Georgetown. And life pivots on these moments. Yes. I love being a medical student. It was just this was in the mid 1980s, and I loved living in DC, and I loved the people I met. I got cancer when I was a fourth year medical student, and that. How old were you? I was 26. Wow. And it changed my life, mostly in good ways. Mostly in good ways, because it has first of all, it taught me how to be a better doctor, and it taught me the power of optimism, yes, and support and empathy, and I've tried to carry that forward. And my life was saved by a surgeon at Sloan Kettering in New York. Mm-hmm. His name is Ronald Spiro, who saved my life. And since that time, I've been, struggling to pay that forward. Wow. To pay that forward. So, you can take an experience like that as unlucky or an obstacle, or you can take an experience like that and use it as fuel. Yes. So
you can see why this is my inspiration here. Dr. Jonathan Reiner. So big inspiration for me.
So as a doctor, I've tried to pay back the gift that I was given. And yes, sometimes I'm successful, sometimes you're not successful. But that's the gift that I've been given, the ability to take care of people who are sick. And I specialize in a couple things. I specialize in the treatment of people who are having a heart attack, an acute heart attack. Mm-hmm. So I still take a lot of night call for that. Oh yeah, I come in, in the middle of the night all the time,
Wow.
all the time. And it's the most satisfying thing I do because I meet these people who are sick and afraid they're going to die because there's something very threatening emotionally and physically about having a heart attack.
Yes.
And people have this sort of impending sense of doom. And then when I open the artery that's closed, heart attacks are caused by blockages in coronary arteries. And when you open that artery and the patient sort of instantly gets better, and they go from 30 minutes ago really wondering whether they were going to live to 30 minutes later asking me if they have to spend the night.
Aww.
And it's so I have a
Real quick though, I remember you telling me a couple stories about driving home at 6 in the morning after saving someone's life.
It's hard to do, and the older I've gotten, it's been hard. It's harder to do. It can be hard to sleep after that. I mean, you can,
But I mean,
even if you're dead, but it can be hard to.
You're charged up though.
You can be, yeah, it can be hard. It can be hard to sleep. But sometimes if you've been up all night.
Oh, of course. It's amazing.
I'm 64 now, and when I was a young doc, I could work for 36 hours. We had to at the time, but now there are times where I have a couch in my office because if I have to be in the hospital early in the morning and I'm done doing something, in the middle of the night and it's 3 now, the concept of me driving home and then driving back and with like 1 hour sleep, it seems bad. So I'll
that's
just
why
crash.
I was saying it. I mean, the strength that you show.
Oh no, not strength. It's the autopilot in the car. No, that's what it really is.
Anyway, go ahead. Keep
No,
going.
but it's very sad. I have a friend who says that I'm addicted to the gratitude, and that might be true.
But who isn't? Seriously.
Well, I guess it's an unusual, privileged, world that that people in healthcare have. I think there are a lot of ways to go with this. The pandemic was horrible for everyone.
Yes.
And it went on forever. But in the early days, in the early months, really for the first year of the pandemic, before there was a vaccine, tens of thousands of people in this country, nurses and technologists and people who worked in labs and x-ray and doctors, went into hospitals every day. Mm-hmm. Went into hospitals every day. And I was never more proud of anything than the people who every day went into hospitals.
That's a big deal, and you don't hear about that enough. These doctors, nurses, I mean, they were risking their lives.
You think about it in ICU. Think about what an ICU nurse did.
Yes.
I'm jumping around here a lot.
It's okay.
But if you think about what an ICU nurse did during the pandemic. So first of all, the virus was very contagious. And it could kill people, and it could kill young people, and it could kill healthcare workers. And so whereas a lot of people, hunkered down somewhere at a beach house or a mountain retreat and just sort of got out of town if they had the resources to do that. And, this when Zoom was invented, and people just sort of started working like that. An ICU nurse went literally into the fire. They ran into the fire. And if you could imagine what they had to do to take care of a sick patient with COVID on a ventilator, the risk they took to themselves or even the people that they lived with at home. I mean, I remember I used to come home from the hospital in scrubs, and I worked in the hospital and we did procedures on people with COVID, but I didn't have nearly the kind of intense experience that an ICU nurse had. And I would basically strip in the garage and run into the shower.
And many of them died. Like, that's what I don't think. A lot of the nurses early on.
There were people who died. Yeah. There were people who died. In any event, this is the but this is the life that I've been privileged to have. I work with the greatest people.
Tell us about some of the people. I mean, can we talk about Dick Cheney and the book?
I did write a book with Dick Cheney and Liz. Liz is also a co-author. I wrote that book because he was a sort of a singular patient, still is. The idea for that book, I mean, I'd been Dick Cheney's doc for about 25 years, and in the heady moments after his transplant, he had in 2010 he had gotten very sick and needed a implantable heart pump to keep him alive, and then after that, about 18 months after that, he was transplanted. And in the days after the transplant, when it was apparent that he was going to do well, I said to Liz and Lynn Cheney that, you could tell the entire story of heart disease, of the triumph over heart disease, angioplasty and stents and clot-busting drugs and cholesterol drugs and bypass surgery and defibrillators and transplant through the story of one unusual patient, and it happened to be, and that patient was Dick Cheney. And when we had this discussion, we were sitting in sort of a lounge across from his ICU room, and Lynn got up from her seat and went in across the hallway into his room, and she came back I didn't know what she was doing. She came back 5 minutes later and she said, Dick's in, he wants to write the book. So I had postponed. His transplant came at a time where we were supposed to go on vacation and go skiing in Colorado. Wow. And my family went ahead, and a few days later when he was doing well and I knew I could leave for a few days, I flew across the country, and I remember texting my wife saying, he's doing well, I think I'm writing a book. And then about 2 weeks later, Liz called me, and she said, hey, were you serious about writing that book? I said, yeah, I was serious. And she says, good, because Dad told Rumsfeld that he's writing a book with you. So we wrote a book, and it's really a book written for patients. It's a book about the history of heart disease told through two voices, my voice and his voice. And we talk about basically the same thing, but in two different voices in each chapter. So that was really a labor of love. So that was my foray into writing. I like to call that my first book. The second book is a little bit, it's taking a little bit longer to come out. That's fun, and hopefully that will continue.
But I remember when you went to all the morning shows with Dick Cheney, and
I'll tell you a funny story.
Yeah.
We were doing some publicity for the book, and we were at the Miami book fair. It's a big book fair in Miami, and we flew down separately, and we did this thing together. And then he told me he was flying commercial back, and I changed my flight to be on his flight because he looked like we were going to be able to make an early flight. So I changed my ticket to be on his flight. So we drove back to Miami International, and we were met at the curb, by like security. And they took us into the airport, and they had like this hidden like VIP check-in area. There were like two podiums in a closed off area where you could discreetly check in,
Nice.
as a passenger. So I was loving this. And so he's at podium on my right, I'm on the podium on the left. And now, mind you, the people at the airport don't really know who I am.
Of course.
But I'm with him. And they made kind of an incorrect assumption. And the person checking me in leaned over to me and quietly asked me, are you carrying a weapon? Thinking that I was his security. She says, because we have to tell the flight marshal on board. And I said to her, not now. So
that's a great one. But also, I want to ask you about the daytime talk shows. I want to know about because some of these were big time shows.
Oh no, I did the Today Show. I remember sitting in the green room next to Andy Cohen, and I didn't know who he was.
Ooh.
So I know who Andy Cohen is now.
But he probably appreciated that too.
Real men watch Bravo. That's all I can say. Someone gave me a T-shirt that says.
But were some of the hosts better than others, or can you talk about that?
I was on. Before I got involved with CNN, I did a piece with Pierce Morgan, when he was working for CNN. Remember Pierce Morgan?
Sure.
Yeah.
He kind of a wry sense of humor, and we did this thing about the book, and at the end he wanted to ask me something he thought was clever about a television show, a short-lived television show that had to do with like the president's physician who's being blackmailed by terrorists to try and somehow harm his patient. And Pierce said to me, "Do you ever worry that terrorists are going to come after you?" And I thought for a second, and I said, "No, because they'd have to get through my wife first."
And I want to say, this is a good opportunity to give a shout out to John's wife and his 2 daughters, who I just think the world of. Just
Thanks, Joel.
amazing people.
Well, they have to be amazing because you kind of touched on this before. You talk about, obviously it's an honor to be in the position that you're in, but you're also sacrificing a lot of your personal time. Your wife has to be incredibly amazing to even put up with you leaving in the middle of the night. And you know what I mean? Like, she knows, I'm sure, what she signed up for, but it's something to live it.
So, thank you. My kids grew up, neither of my kids are docs because maybe they've seen Dad go in so many times in the middle of the night. But we used to tell our kids on weekends where we would often take 2 cars to something because if I had to split, I didn't need to ruin their day. So if we went to a movie or we went out to lunch and I was on call, and I expect my wife and I still do this, we would take 2 cars. And what I told our kids was that if we were doing something and I had to leave because I had to go into the hospital, it was because somebody, a stranger, was having the worst day of their life. Not a bad day, they were having a heart attack. And I think most people, when it comes to a personal event, something happening to them, would probably rank having a heart attack as one of the worst days of their life. And I was going to take care of them. And I try and teach my fellows. I work at GW. I'm in a teaching hospital, and I teach our trainees that when you come in to take care of somebody who's acutely ill, you have to understand that you're taking care of somebody having one of the worst days of their life. And the other thing, which I actually try not to think about acutely while you're taking care of someone, because that could sort of paralyze you, but you're also taking care of a universe of people.
Yes.
Because that person typically is attached to a lot of people. And so, there's an old tenet of the Jewish faith, and I think Joel knows what I'm about to say, which is if you save a life, it's like you've saved the world entire, right? And that sounds sort of like a romantic notion until you realize the ripple effect that people every person has, the people that care about them, the things that they have done for people, the things that they will do for people. Right, the impact of having a grandpa around, or a husband, or a daughter, or a sister, and that is both the beautiful piece of what I do, and it's also a bit of the weight, a bit of the weight. So and I still tell my kids that. They're in their late 20s, that someone else is having the worst day of their life.
What about, I remember a story, I'm not sure you can talk about it. It has to do with Dick Cheney and a key and an envelope.
Oh, that was really lovely. I told you that I mentioned that he had this, we put this pump in his heart because he was dying.
Right.
And it was during the summer, And we didn't take vacation that summer because I couldn't leave. I didn't want to leave town until he was out of the woods, and he was sick as stink for weeks. He was in the ICU at Fairfax for 6 weeks. And during that ordeal, Mrs. Cheney, Lynn Cheney, asked me if I was going to take vacation. I said, I'm not going anywhere until he's out of the hospital. So we succeeded in getting him out of the hospital. And when he got home, he was so weak that an ambulance had to take him home. Oh. And when he got home, we had a party for him in his bedroom, in their bedroom. And
this is at the vice president's mansion?
Well, this is after he's out of office, at his home in Virginia. And it was lovely. Mrs. Cheney had gifts, and there were a few the docs there and a few of the nurses there, and it was really a lovely gesture. And she had little presents for people, cufflinks and things like that. And but for me, she had an envelope with a card, and there was something in the card, and there was a key to the card in the card, and what the note said was, Dr. Reiner, this is a gift that you have to return, but only after you use it. And it was the key to their house in Jackson. Oh. So that summer, my family and I, our two girls, my wife and I, spent a week in like our VRBO was the Cheney house in Jackson, Wyoming. And not only that, they gave his old car for us to drive. So I'm driving his old Jeep around Jackson. People are waving at me. So it was that was really lovely.
That's a great story.
You've done so many amazing things, and I just really want to touch a little bit on the medical side, as far as people in the community. How do we not end up in your office, right? You've seen so many things. How do we take control of our own health, right? You have people telling you various things depending on the doctor that you go to.
Yeah.
What do you do?
I think, well, first thing I tell people, particularly busy people, and everyone in this area is busy, is that you have to schedule time for yourself. And you have to do things for yourself. Mm-hmm. So for instance, exercise. Exercise is important for people of all age. It's really important for people as they get older. It's very important for people who have modifiable risk factors for heart disease, right? Like hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol. We try and use medications to control those, but for the other risk factors, we try and change their lifestyle, yes. Right? We try and change their personal habits, and to get people to move more. I try and say, look, you have to schedule 30 to 45 minutes a day for you, and if you have a full iPhone calendar every day, booked from 8 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night. Somewhere in that has to be time for you. And it's great, not for your cardiovascular health, but it's really great for your head. Really great for your head. So I think that's super important. People need to start thinking about what they eat as fuel for their machine. And think about the kind of, a lot of people who buy a car the manufacturer recommends a higher octane fuel because somehow it's better for the engine, and a lot of people are willing to spend more money to put better fuel in their car, and yet will, while the car is pumping, they'll go in and they'll grab a bag of Doritos. Yes. So I think just we need to be collectively a little bit smarter about what we eat, have a broader diet that's less reliant on animal protein. I'm not telling people to become vegetarian or vegan, but to try and build more animal, not animal, but more vegetable, non-animal protein into their diet, right? Less red meats, more fish, chicken without the skin, kind of things. Change your diet around. Go to your doctor, find out, know what your blood pressure is. I had a conversation with a patient today whose blood pressure was just out of control, and I told her that hypertension is an insidious disease, it's epidemic in this area. It's really horribly out of control. It's insidious because people who have hypertension don't often know they have it, or they know they have it. They don't really feel so bad if their blood pressure is elevated until something bad happens. But all the while, that hypertension is damaging their blood vessels and their kidneys and their eyes and their head and their heart. So that has to be treated, and that's a huge cause of illness, in this area. It's endemic in the black community in all over the United States, particularly in the Washington D.C. area. So know your blood pressure, know your cholesterol. If your cholesterol is high and you have other risk factors that should be treated, we have great therapies for that. We spoke about weight loss and exercise. So be in tune. Yeah, be in tune to your health.
If you take the medicine as prescribed and bring some of those, I guess you'd call them numbers, down, are you in a better position?
Yeah. So here's the thing. When I was just starting med school, 40 years ago, your genetics would put you on these train tracks that were likely going to take you to a station that you didn't want to be eventually, right?
Yeah.
But over the last 4 decades, we've developed these phenomenal therapeutics that can divert the train.
Wow.
Right? So I think probably the most impactful medicine of the last 40 years are probably statins, anti-cholesterol drugs, statins, which changed the natural history of atherosclerosis. Smoking cessation, if you look in the United States, there have been 2 pivot points, 2 inflection points when cardiovascular mortality have dropped. One is when Surgeon General issued, his famous report in the 1960s about cigarette smoking, and when cigarette use started to drop in the United States. And the other was when statins became available in the United States in the late 1980s. So treating hypertension and getting cholesterol really low and getting diabetics to have very good control of their sugars, these kinds of things have dramatically lowered the incidence of heart disease in the United States. And then, I'm a plumber. I fix things. So, we have these amazing therapeutics. I put tiny stents in arteries, and people are having a heart attack. I do it from a little puncture in the wrist.
Wow.
These days, more and more, I replace heart valves through a puncture in your leg about the size of a fat pencil.
Okay, but that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I know. Which is why. So we can replace like for instance, an aortic valve, the valve that separates the big pumping chamber of the heart from the rest of the body. I can replace that from a puncture in the leg, thinner than the size of this pen.
Wow.
In a patient sleeping with the kind of sedation you get for colonoscopy, without general anesthesia, with an overnight stay in the hospital. And I've done it in someone as old as 101.
Wow. That's impressive.
I actually did it in a medical school professor.
Wow.
He was a very old man, and in fact, he was so old that the year he retired was the year I graduated from medical school.
Wow.
And then a few years ago, he came in, he needed his valve replaced. He was 99.9.
Did he already have one? Or
no, he needed his valve. He needed his original valve replaced, and he was 99.9. He was a month away from his 100th birthday.
Wow.
So what an honor! I mean, he had been the chairman of pediatrics at Georgetown when I was a medical student.
Nice.
So we replaced his valve, and he came back a month later and he did well. And he came back for the follow-up visit, and I was really excited to see him because he had just turned 100. How lovely! And I went across the street to Whole Foods before his visit, and I bought a cake. I bought and I wrote his name. We wrote his name on it. Happy 100th birthday, and his 2 lovely daughters had brought him, to clinic for the follow-up. And he was in a wheelchair because it was hard for him to get around. But he looked great, and I was so excited. I wanted to show him the cake, and the exam rooms are relatively tight. Mm-hmm. And as I had the box open. I'm tilting the cake to show it to him. I sort of trip a little bit, and as I trip, I start to lose control of the cake. And everything starts to happen in slow motion now. And I start to fear that I'm actually going to dump the cake on him. And in a last ditch moment to salvage the situation, I jammed my finger into the cake. And the daughters were horrified. And one daughter said to me, "Oh, I'm glad we saw this after, not before."
After the receipt. That's a great story.
Yes, we have these great, anyway, but I digress. We have these great therapeutics, drugs, devices. I love cardiology because there's so much we can do. We have these amazing diagnostic tests, these great drugs, and amazing therapeutics. So it's
Good.
It's really cool.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
You know, we should be very happy in America that we have people like John, the doctors, and
Absolutely.
incredible. I want to ask you, I think a little while back you were involved in trying to pass a bill for defibrillators. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I take care of people who've had a sudden cardiac arrest, meaning something has happened to the rhythm of their heart and the heart stops beating outside the hospital. It can be caused by heart attack, but it can be caused by other things. But the net result is their heart starts to quiver, and then the clock starts, and you have just about 5 minutes before permanent brain damage sets in. And what I realized is that the most common factor in the people who survived had nothing to do with my skill or my team's skill. What it had to do was with luck. Were they lucky enough to be near somebody who could do CPR, and were they lucky enough to have quick access to a defibrillator? And we all see these on the wall of buildings and the airports, these defibrillators. And they were really designed to be used by people with no training. When you open up these defibrillators, the audio prompts talk you through the whole thing. Check for a pulse, place patches, hands off, analyzing rhythm, press the button.
Wow.
And the devices won't let you deliver a shock to somebody who doesn't need it. So if someone has just fainted for more benign reasons, you can't shock. It won't let you shock them. But yet, there aren't enough of these devices around. And one of the reasons why they're not around is that every state has a different law. 20 years ago, the AHA had decided to try and get every state to pass a Good Samaritan law that would pertain to defibrillators to protect people who would try and rescue someone. And the unintended consequence is that every state wrote a different law. And the laws are just different enough to create uncertainty in the minds of multi-state corporations, that would cause them to wonder if they had for instance, a defibrillator in a Starbucks in DC.
Right.
What is it different in Virginia? Is it different in Maryland? And the answer is yes. Each of them had different requirements for it. So we wrote a bill that would basically said something very simple. It said, if you in your business have a working defibrillator and it's kept in good working condition, and it's used by either one of your employees or used by a Good Samaritan in good faith to try and save someone's life, you are immune from any kind of negligence lawsuit. And you would think, who would oppose that?
Right?
Right? The trial lawyers would oppose that, and the trial lawyers did oppose that. So I spent almost a decade lobbying Congress for this bill. It was called the Cardiac Arrest Survival Act. Wow. And it was reintroduced last year. You know who reintroduced it? Jerry Connolly reintroduced it this past year after Damar Hamlin had a cardiac arrest on the field.
That's incredible. I didn't even realize it was 10 years. I mean,
it's been almost 10 years. It was introduced in multiple Congresses.
That's a big deal, Jonathan.
And that came on the heels. We did one other thing as it pertains to defibrillators. Federal DC, K Street DC and Capitol Hill DC, you can find defibrillators in a lot of places. But DC is a city of great disparities, and in large parts of the city, there are no defibrillators. So it was very easy to raise money for this, and the pitch was really easy. I met with people and I said, listen, I have this idea. I want to give defibrillators away. And we gave them out to the churches, all of the churches in DC. I gave them to the churches and the Boys and Girls Clubs, and all the DC libraries had defibrillators that we gave them, and VFW posts. And we gave away about 120 defibrillators, raised very quickly like $400,000 to do it. And then we had another proposal. DC schools had a mandate to actually have defibrillators in every school, but it was unfunded, and most schools didn't have defibrillators. So we I went to the DC Board of Education and I said, here's the deal. I'll raise all the money for defibrillators for all the schools in DC. All you have to do is take ownership of them. And we'll jointly decide how many you need per school, and I'll just raise all the money for that. And they said no.
No?
They said no.
Wow.
They said no.
But I'm just blown away and so impressed. I didn't realize for 10 years, and that to me is the essence of the kind of person you are, wanting to give back. The other thing I wanted to ask you though, because you're on CNN often, mm-hmm. and a lot of people I think know you from CNN. And in fact, people have said, "Oh, Dr. Jonathan Reiner?" I'm like, "Yeah, I saw him on CNN." So is that just something, obviously it's done because you're very respected. So how often is it done? Is it sort of spontaneous, or how does that work?
I work for them. I'm a medical analyst.
Oh, okay.
I'm their last medical analyst. It started during the pandemic. I had been doing some informal sort of backstage advising to a member of Congress and kind of a senior reporter for CNN. And then about a month into the pandemic, I was asked to do a hit one night on Erin Burnett's show. And it turned out that I did a hit every night that week. And then I did a hit every night for an entire month. I did a hit for 4 consecutive weeks. And then they offered me a job as a medical analyst. But I still do it when the news cycle moves towards health issues. These days, I've sort of found a niche in the sort of intersection of medicine and politics. But what I really like, there are a couple things I like about it. One is that I get to do what I do with patients, which is to try and explain in an understandable but non-condescending way a complicated topic. Right? So no one wants someone to draw stick figures for them. But people need to understand. I need people to understand what I'm telling them I need to do, or what their condition is. So doctors can or do have the ability, hopefully, to educate people in a respectful way. And that's what I try to do on television. That's what I still try and do, just simply tell the truth. And what I didn't understand until I started getting letters from people, email and letters and gifts, and they're sending me scrub hats and custom-made masks, 1 or 2 hate letters. But what I didn't understand was that during the pandemic, how important it was to people for the messages we were trying to, the explanation we were giving them, the reassurance, the advice. And people stop me now, and I have random people that stop me in the street and thank me for helping get them through the pandemic. And I had no idea I was doing that.
No, I think it was like a nightly thing. I remember a couple people, that they were confident and felt better when you were on. Oh, and that was a brilliant move, I guess, for them to put you on every night.
I love doing it.
It calmed people, I think.
I've loved doing, and also I told the truth. I tried to tell the truth. I've loved doing it, and also in part because it's just inside my comfort zone. And it's sometimes it's good to do things that make you a little.
Wow.
I heard once at a local golf course, Michael Jordan played with some of the local members, and they said to him, "Hey, what do you want to play for?" And Michael Jordan said, "Whatever makes you a little uncomfortable." And it makes me a little uncomfortable.
I gotta ask John, and I know John well, and I know he loves music, and I know another side of John where during the day he's in the scrubs and he's a very serious and very well respected doctor, but I think at night sometimes he likes to put on the jeans, a black leather jacket, and see some shows downtown, maybe the Anthem or the 930 Club. And in fact, I've accompanied him a couple times on those. So let's talk about music.
Well, I'll tell you what it really is I realized that when my kids were teenagers, how can dad stay relevant? It's not easy. It's really not easy. So they went to school in the district, and I would drive them into the district. My wife would pick them up, and sometimes they'd talk in the car. Sometimes they wouldn't talk in the car. That's okay. But it was dad time. But then I realized that, what if I take them to concerts, to music they want to hear? And what I found out very quickly was that if I was willing to buy them tickets and take them and often their friends to concerts, they were happy to have me come along.
100%.
So for years we went to 9:30 Club and to the Anthem and to clubs in Baltimore, and most of this was their music, and in this lovely world is round kind of way. My younger daughter, who's a sort of a new lawyer now living in New York, this year she bought tickets for us to see Springsteen because she knows that old dudes like me like Springsteen.
Right.
So she came down from New York and she took me to see Springsteen.
Nice.
And music is.
I gotta say, still the best Springsteen album. First one, "Greetings from Asbury Park."
From Asbury Park. I remember the moment. It's interesting. I remember the moment I heard about some guy named Bruce Springsteen. I was in high school. I was like a sophomore in high school, and my friend, my childhood friend, who I still know, named Stuart Rosen, he came to my apartment in Brooklyn. He lived several blocks away, and he had an album, and he says, "This is going to change your world. This is 1975." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Let's play this." And it was Born to Run.
Aww.
And it was Born to Run. And he was right. And that music. But I like music. I have an eclectic kind of group of artists that I like. It's like you develop sort of a soundtrack in your life.
Right.
So it's.
I like the Born to Run reference to you, though. And just a courageous type of way that you've lived your life.
Right.
And that's sort of an anthem, I think, to that.
I don't know if I've lived my life in a courageous way. Do you ski? I forget if you ski.
Not in a long time.
Not in a long time. So I learned to ski when I was in my 20s, which is too late. It's really too late. But I like to ski.
Right.
But I'm a bad skier because you can never really be a good skier if you start skiing when you're already afraid to die.
Yep, 100%. I was thinking that, yes.
You can't do anything really well, if you learn it when you're afraid to die already. So I'm constantly trying to make the next skiing is turning, right? Skiing is all about turning, right? I'm trying to make the next turn better than the last turn. So that's kind of the metaphor, for life. Try to do the next thing a little bit better than the last thing.
That's beautiful.
So,
but I do think that your courage, your willpower, your intensity, your empathy, all of those things is about you. And if I can use a Bruce Springsteen, I'll use a Bruce Springsteen. But that really epitomizes you. And, this is one of the reasons we decided to do this,
Absolutely.
Traci and I, because we want to recognize people in our community, honor them. So much that they've done. Even now, when you've talked to me, many things I didn't even know, I'm even more impressed. So that's really at the essence of what we're trying to bring. And I want to thank everybody for watching.
Absolutely.
The fabric of our community. I have to thank Dr. Jonathan Reiner, who I love and respect. And thanks for coming out to G Street.
it's been an honor.
Thank you very much.
Right back at you. Thank you so much, Traci.
And it looks courageous from where I'm sitting.
Thank you so much. A pleasure.